This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Transcendent Life. I'm really excited about today's subject because it's not one that's always the most sexy to be talked about, but this gentleman is truly an expert. Don Markland is the CEO and owner of Accountability Now, an executive coaching and business strategy company in Jacksonville, Florida. He is also a Forbes.com contributor for entrepreneurship, leadership, and sales. He has over 20 years of experience in the world of sales, marketing, leadership, and business growth. Don spent time in the startup world as the owner and chief operating officer for Launch Leads, a marketing startup in Salt Lake City, Utah, where he helped them achieve record performance in both client and revenue growth, and was named to Utah Business Magazine's top 40 under 40 for leading business executives. Don, so glad to have you here, man. How you doing?
Man, I'm fantastic. Thank you for having me on, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about ways business owners and entrepreneurs can be better.
I'm passionate about that subject as well, and I did start just because accountability is that word that we all hear, but I can't say it jumps off the page as something being sexy, quote unquote.
Yeah, that's right.
So talk to me about it, brother. How did you get into really becoming a professional when it comes to accountability and really helping businesses perform at a higher level?
So I think it's a great question. So I'll tell you kind of in a very brief format my story with it. I was in my mid-20s, 25 years old. I was about 70 pounds, 65, 70 pounds heavier than I am now, which is not something you thrilled about, right? But I was there. I was vice president of sales and operations for a call center company. So here I was, mid-20s, doing well, right? I'm a VP and felt successful, but at the same time, I was miserable. I was on a plane 21 times a year. I had 3 kids, my beautiful wife, whom I never saw, and my favorite restaurant was this fine dining establishment called Taco Bell. I'm sure you've heard of this, right? I used to go to that place all the time, and it was awful, and I didn't realize it. And one day, I was in this training room in Rock Falls, Illinois. I just finished this big training, and I was thinking, my whole life is not work-life balance. It's work, a little bit of life. And it just didn't make sense, and I needed some clarity. And I'd read all these self-help books and courses, and nothing resonated. And then kind of lightning in a bottle hit me of, hey, you need clarity around one word, accountability. And it became, to me, as I defined it, the glue that ties commitment to results. And I created this little program, totally selfish. It was like the Don Markland way of living, only for me. I was never going to tell anybody. But as I started to live my 4 C's, I lost weight. I saw my wife more, and she liked the thinner me, which was a huge upside. My business started to do better. So I made my employees, because I was the boss, you all have to do this now. You don't get a choice. Their marriages got better. Some of them lost weight. And the business went from about 15 million to 25 to 35, up to 45 million over the next 3.5 years. And I thought, oh my gosh, the more we hold people accountable and on a real system, it works. And to make the long story short, it was shortly after there when I was living this high, right? I'm this super cocky executive now. I've got a program and everything I work, touch turns to gold. My wife gets diagnosed with cancer. And she's fine now, but when she got diagnosed, I was thinking, this is bull, right? I don't drink or smoke or swear, and my wife gets cancer, right? I can think of a lot of other people that I thought at the time deserved this, which is horrible to say. And the only thing that got me through those 2 years was the 4 C's, doing what I said I'm going to do. And it was after there when I said to my wife, I wouldn't wish these 2 years on my worst enemy. And at the same time, I wish everybody could taste this and see what accountability can get you to do. And that's when I started to really push it like crazy.
Well, I mean, obviously, the first question that we beg to ask is, what in the world are the 4 C's? Shortly followed up with, have you gone back to the Rock Falls, Illinois Taco Bell where this got struck, But let's go ahead and get started with the 4 C's, man, because I'm in. Who doesn't want to lose weight,
That's
have
right.
a better marriage, all of those amazing things.
Exactly. And so many people, like you said, you're like, hey, accountability is not sexy. Well, the reason it's not sexy is because they think accountability only means negative. It only means when I screw up, and that's just a bunch of crap. Okay, accountability is, like I said, the glue that ties commitment to results. You take accountability for the misses and the wins in your life. And so many times we just think, well, I better hold that person accountable when they screw up. When they nail it, hey, you should hold them accountable for their win, right? Accountability is always positive, always. And so the 4 C's, it first starts with 2 rules and then 4 C's. The first rule is accountability always starts with me. I don't go around pointing fingers. I always look at myself. How did I contribute to this problem? No matter what it is, I got to take ownership for what I contributed. The second thing is there are no egos in accountability. This is important. You think about the sport of baseball. If I throw a pitch and somebody swings and misses, that's a strike. And it doesn't matter if the umpire calls the strike or the opposing player calls a strike or a fan in the stands calls a strike. It doesn't matter. A strike is a strike. And so many times we burn all this energy griping, hey, you're being a hypocrite. You shouldn't call me out, or you do the same thing. Why are we wasting that energy? Right? Drop the ego. The fact was it was a strike. Who cares, right? Get over it. So those are the 2 rules. The 4 C's are real simple. The first is critique success. So don't break your wrist, pat yourself on the back when you nail it. Why don't you stop, get real tough on yourself, and do it better next time? That'll stop you from resting. Always critique your success first. The second thing is correct failure. You'll know this because you've talked to so many entrepreneurs. Failure is part of the game. You don't punish your mistakes, you correct them. I once lost $900,000 for a company in 45 days because I was doing marketing spend incorrectly. I mean, it's literally 0 ROI on $900,000. Well, I didn't beat myself up. I corrected it, and we generated 20 million over the next 2 years, and by correcting the mistake, not punishing it. The third thing is we celebrate growth. Hardest thing in this life for you, for me, for our families is to choose to grow. And you've been to the gym before and you've done bench presses. The most important rep is the last one. The one when your arms are failing and you're like, I can't do it anymore. And then you do it. That's growth. That's what we celebrate. Not success. Success, I expect you to be successful. I expect my kids to be successful. I don't celebrate people meeting expectations. I celebrate the hard choice. And that's why we celebrate growth. And then the last thing is crush mediocrity. We just crush it, right? You're in Florida, I'm in Florida. You'll know what bugs are. Okay, I don't care how clean your house is. You're gonna know what bugs are. And we get these big old cockroaches, and when we see them, we gotta crush them with just everything we've got. Because if we just tap it, they go call their friends and say, "The Markland house is full of wimps. Let's go." And that's how mediocrity is in your life. When you see it, whatever it is, whether that's a vice, an addiction, shirking on certain things you do, taking care of your family, whatever it is, you crush it with just such fierceness that you're done dealing with it and you move on.
So I want to go back literally to the parking lot or whatever was happening, because you create this system, this thought in your head. You get clarity on the C's. But is it divine intervention? This is something that you've been having marinate right up in the head. How do you come with this? Because I love it, and I can't wait to dive more into it. Sure. But how do you start with critique success, where you're like, all right, I'm never going to rest on my laurels, I guess would be the idea. I want to know how to do it better the next time. But where did that come from?
So I've always been a big reader, right? I try to read, anywhere between 60 and 80 books a year. I'm a big, passionate, personal study guy. And I read a lot of books on self-help, accountability, and they all had kind of good ideas, but I felt like it just never resonated with me. So as I was sitting there and I just finished the most beautiful chalupa, I was sitting there kind of thinking about it and trying to go, where am I failing with accountability? What is it? So that's where I defined it. And then I remember thinking through all the spots where you fail. And I thought, for example, at the time I was riding bikes a lot, even though I was super overweight. That was the only thing I could tell myself I could do for cardio. And I always knew when I rode a bike, I'd put a marker in the distance. Hey, that telephone pole, I'm going to ride for 3 blocks. And once I get to that telephone pole, then I can take a break. And I realized that is one of my biggest problems is I'm always going to these markers and then just, I did it. And then it's super hard to get going again. So I wrote down critique success. That doesn't make any sense. If I just keep moving the marker, every time I get close, okay, wait a minute. I did it in this amount of time. I'll bet the next one I can do faster. Move the marker, move the marker. All of a sudden, that became an epiphany to me, realizing where my problems were. And I started to do all the things aligned with that was, where do I drop off? And then, look, I have a marketing background, so I wasn't stupid. I was like, well, I'm going to call this the 4 C's because then I can remember it, right? Made it easy. So that's where it was developed. It always started with where I failed, what problems I had, and then how I can have a system to manage those problems.
Well, we talk about failure, and you said, talking to entrepreneurs or athletes or executives, failure is a part of everyone that's ever done anything. I mean, that's just, but the way you say it, correct failure. So you were very clear. Do not beat yourself up. Learn from it, I guess is what I would say, but correct the failure. The $900,000 mistake that's not even a blip on the radar for them once you corrected it. So I love it. It's pretty profound, actually. But so that's your system for literally. It's not failure. It's just, or maybe it is failure, but you're just going to overcome
Sure.
it or make it.
Yeah. So, like, there's accountability. When you have a miss and you do something dumb, you absolutely say, hey, you know what? I messed up. I didn't do that right. So then go back through the process and find out, where was the decision wrong? Did you have good data, but then you chose left instead of right? Okay, then why did you choose left? What made you choose left? What analysis did you do? Right? Or did you, like, for example, my marketing thing that I lost all that money? There was a process in place to test all the phone numbers to make sure they were accurate. And I chose actively, don't worry about that. We're moving too fast. I'm sure it's fine. And there's the correction right there, identified right on it. And you better believe every time I launch a campaign now, we check the phone numbers, right? Yeah. So because I've corrected it. And that's the method. You go back through the failure, pinpoint, what assumptions did I make? What did I do wrong? I can correct that. It's like an AI system almost.
Yeah, and we got to go back to the rules, because this is where I know you do business coaching. And so, but one of the fears so many leaders have is to say, I screwed up. And you're saying, look, there is no egos, right? And
Yeah.
accountability starts with me. Are you seeing that your clients, I guess you pick and choose your clients, so I guess you probably are seeing them do this, but how often are you seeing leaders where they're not willing to say, yeah, I screwed up, that's on me, but rather not own that mistake? And I'm just curious because I watch it in business quite
It
often.
happens all the time. And that's part of what we start to pound in, right? And start to correct their thinking. Like, no, wait a minute. This is you, right? That's why the first two rules are the rules at the very top. And just, historically, the rules didn't come about, and the 4 C's were what birthed first. I didn't add the rules until a couple of years later, when I realized, as people struggled with ego, right? And they struggled with, they love the 4 C's when they can point to other people. That's a mistake from you. And I realized, okay, it's losing track, right? And so I put those on top over it, because if you can't get past the fact that, hey, you contributed to this somehow and you controlled it, then you're never going to get to anything else. And I go as far as to teach people, like, look, everything is your fault. I want you to assume that. So if the IT department or the computer development department doesn't get the website up in time, and you guys miss your lead generation date because it wasn't up, you don't get to blame marketing. You blame yourself and say, well, now wait a minute. I could have called them more beforehand. I could have walked into their office and sat on them and said, I'm not getting off until you do this. And you go back and start to look at, where did you fail to contribute to the solution? And it changes your perspective rather than blaming. And here's the other thing that's important. So many people get defensive when accountability comes, right? They start to blame back. When you go in and say, hey, I realize I let you down. I didn't do this and this and this. Almost always they respond with, no, you know what? We didn't. It was our fault. And we should have done better. And they start to drive their own personal accountability rather than you going in and starting a fight.
Yeah, you open the door to vulnerability, certainly, when
Right.
you say, look, I'm at fault here, regardless of who actually, but starting with me, it's on me. I hear my dad in the background, literally in my head, saying, look, if you screwed up, own it. Don't let it happen again. I mean, I've heard my dad say that probably 500,000 times. So is that something that you grew up with, or is this really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being honest with your mistakes was a part of the Markland home, where we had three brothers. And, growing up in a family with three brothers, everything's competitive. everything is, it's competitive, talking at the kitchen table, sports, you name it. Everything was, how do we compete? And you're going to get a lot of mistakes. You're going to get a lot of people that do dumb things. And we learned very young, hey, you want to have an open kimono approach to your mistakes, right? Open it up and say, hey, I messed up. And it's better to acknowledge and correct than to hide, because now I got to find it. And now I wonder, what are you hiding, right? What are all the problems? I can't tell you how many times I got in trouble with that as a kid and learned it the right way.
It's a great rule. I love it. So let's get back into the celebrating growth. You're very specific. It wasn't celebrating wins. You are clear on your word of growth. Is that so? The expectations is what I kind of wrote down is, so here's our expectations. When we hit that, we're not high-fiving. It's when we exceed that. So talk to me a little bit more about what that celebration even looks like.
So, and it's going to tie back into something you said about people saying they have a hard time acknowledging their, this is my fault or something like that. And they sure want to take credit for the wins. Okay. And so when I see that, I really hammer on, look, we only celebrate growth for a reason, because growth is when you made choices that were hard, that were uncomfortable, right? There is no, I'm going to quote David Goggins here in his book, there's no growth in the comfort zone. All right. So you're not going to get growth points because, hey, you did a podcast today. Well, that's great. This is basically what you do, right? You have to do things that are hard, uncomfortable for you, that made you better. Sometimes that aligns with your success. Sure it does. And so you celebrate kind of both. But the biggest things is always looking internally. Hey, I want to make the biggest celebrations when I've grown out of something or done something different. And I mean big celebrations. I tell people, take a trip. When you get, if somebody's super introverted and we've been training them how to make a sales call and they get one, hey, reward that like crazy, right? Reward that they finally did something hard rather than just, hey, my numbers are really good. I expect you to be good, man. I expect you to do well.
And I'm going to sidetrack just for a minute, just because you brought up something. You said you don't cuss, and obviously Goggins, anybody that read the book has watched him. He does
a lot.
Yeah. But clearly you're disregarding necessarily the words, but you're hearing the messages. Sure. How easy, because you're reading 60 books, I think you said, did you say?
Yeah. Between reading and listening, I have, audio books and hardback books. And so I do 60 plus a year.
Easily. So how do you kind of just put the judgment aside, or the whatever you would call it, where I'm hearing the message, not the way it's being, the tone?
Sure. So I think that's a great question about, from a perspective of the word tolerance, is, look, his perspective and the way he was raised, there are a lot of people that have language. Look, that is as common to them as me saying heck or shiz, what I'll say when I swear, right? So it's very common to them. So I don't find I just can zip right past it. Now, if I'm with somebody personally that's throwing it in my face a lot, I've more than one occasion I've said, hey, I'm not a huge fan of language. So if it's comfortable for you to dial it down, but some people say it's not. I was raised with this. So why would I judge somebody? It'd be the same thing in my perspective of judging somebody for the way that they think. I can't. They were raised that way, and that's normal for them. So
I like it, brother, because just when you said, I don't cuss, and then I'm thinking about the book, I'm like, well, that one's
lots of it. Yeah. I'm surprised he didn't cuss in the title. He swears a lot, right?
And then the last C, crushing mediocrity. How do you define mediocrity? Is that looking around at the other folks in your industry? Is that something you personally said? Because I'm with it, man. I look, everyone wants to excel. My company's called Let's Go Win for the,
Yeah.
So, but what is mediocrity, and how do you get a good gauge on what that looks like?
So that's a powerful question, and it changes for everybody, right? Every person has their own kind of definition of what is mediocre for them, right? The truth of the matter is I relate it to my wife's cancer. Okay. We all have it. We all have mediocrity right now. You do, I do, our families do, our employees do, and it's infecting them. And sometimes it spreads aggressively. Sometimes it's, spreading slower. And so it'll manifest itself in a lot of ways for different people. Sometimes it's as simple as, hey, I'm an exaggerator. I don't tell the truth. Okay, boom, We're going to fix that. Okay, you've created now a habit in your life, and I want you to crush that. Right? Sometimes it's a little more hard to diagnose, right? And because it's not a pure prescription, but it is, you'll know it when you start to live the other C's. You'll start to notice things that repeat and come up, and you go, you know what, I'm done. And one of my favorite stories with Crush Mediocrity, I had this client. He was a real estate investor. He and his wife were partnered together, building great real estate properties. And we did a lot of great things and grew their business almost 30% together. And while they were working, he was struggling with a lot. He was the business development guy. So he was struggling a lot with, finding properties and finding other co-investors and things like that, because he didn't like making those calls. I mean, who likes making calls? And on his list was to do that. And we went over and over, and I was like, this is mediocrity now. You know what you're supposed to do, and you're actively choosing not to do it. And that night in bed, I guess he was sitting there with his wife, and she was trying to go to sleep. And then out of nowhere, he was writing down his daily plan, which he was supposed to do for the next day. And all of a sudden he just went, and slammed his hand on his leg. And he goes, I'm sick of it. And his wife goes, what is wrong with you? And he goes, well, I'm just crushing mediocrity. That's all I'm doing. And I got an email from her the next day. She said, just so you know, your crush mediocrity is ruining my bed life with my husband. And that was okay, right? So that's the mindset. You'll see it. And I'm sure you're familiar with it, especially in sports and things, this concept of, I'm not giving it on every play, all right? I'm not, and you just have to identify it and then just smash it out when you can.
So, and you said you once you recognize it, right? And you said sometimes, that introspection, if you can't find it for yourself, I'm imagining you're working with clients. That's what you're bringing to the table. You're saying, look, yeah, your business is whatever, 10 million. You want it to be at 20. Here's what needs to change. Is that a factual statement that's a big
all the time? Yeah. Almost, and it's amazing how, especially when you get a business to about 4 or 5 million, and they can't seem to double, right? And you should, once you get to 5, you should be able to get to 10. Okay. If your market's right and you're doing it right. And the vast majority of the time they don't. It's because I have a founder who's got founder syndrome, who is, I got to control every process. I got to approve every post. I got to do every this. I got to do all this. And that's mediocrity. That's lack of trust, right? You don't trust your people. You don't and I'll get with them. I'll spend a couple hours with them, and I come right back. Hey, I got a lot of sales and marketing strategies, but they're all going to fail if I can't get you out of the way. You're the problem. And it's a powerful kind of reckoning. Founder syndrome is a real thing. It's what made them great, and then it's what makes them stop scaling, which is typically why they sell to VCs and VCs kick them out.
And I'm guessing that just goes right back to the rule 2. There's no egos, right? Like, sorry, right. You wrapped up in your ego right now. If your true goal is to take it to, double, that just means maybe removing you as this position. That's okay.
Yeah, that's right. Or shifting you to a new role where you're, one of the businesses that I'm a coach with, we shifted one of their founders who wanted to be kind of the chairman of the board founder. They built their business on being great at marketing, not all the other stuff that he was trying to run. So we said, still be the great founder, still be this, but we're going to give you day-to-day view of marketing only. And you can go back to doing why you even started this whole thing. They did that. And literally within 90 days, they had shot up on a whole trajectory back to where they wanted to be, back on plan, by just moving that founder from having an opinion on things that he wasn't brilliant at, saying, go back to what your love was. Go back to what you do.
Well, then that was my question to that, because this is obviously one of those challenging, or can be looked at as a challenging conversation, because they're bringing you in. They're ready for that. Or do you have some suggestions to folks that are dealing with this every single day? You see it in companies all the time. How do you bring up that challenging conversation to say, look, maybe this isn't the best fit? Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yes. And so, obviously I have a coaching business, and I'm a big fan of coaching, but everyone should have what I call a K.A.P, K-A-P, key accountability partner in their life. Because if they don't, you're going to only know what you know, and it doesn't push you to greatness. And so I'll give you just a perfect example in this teeny little story. So back, we talked about launch leads. My first, 120 days there, I made the company worse. we were losing more money than when I started. And this is the guy who had a program, who could never do anything wrong. And boy, if I didn't let everybody know that, I'd made the company worse after about 120 days. And I was so frustrated. One day I had a long commute home, and I called my wife, and I called her and I said, this sucks. This job sucks. I should be back at that other company where I could be president by now, but we decided to do this entrepreneurial journey. We're losing all of our money, blah, blah, blah. And I was just whining about how much the world sucked. And my wife said, this is absolutely factual, exactly what she said. She goes, are you done complaining? And I said, yes. And she goes, good. Lucky for you, I didn't marry a loser. From now on, you can't call me complaining. You've been doing it for weeks. Only call me when you've got the solutions to the problem and you want to talk about the 4 C's. Otherwise, you are the problem and you should leave. And then she slams down the phone, okay, or clicks it. It was a cell phone, right? There was no rotary phones. And that's what turned me on to the idea of a coach. Now, my wife had a background. She had been an executive at an optical company in Utah, so she'd done really well. She had strong business acumen, but I needed somebody outside that I could talk to. And I did not call her every day, did not have good things to say every day, but she kept pushing me back to the 4 C's and what I knew. And that company, which was at that time a negative $10,000 monthly run rate. So every hour we were open, we were losing money, and you will not win with that model. Make sure your listeners know that. Don't seek that. A year and a half later, we crossed 1.5 million, almost to the date. And she functioned as my coach. And that's when I realized this is powerful. And I have a coach to this day. I still have my own coach that I work with. And he does the same thing that she did. And that's what everybody needs, an accountability partner somewhere.
You're hearing from a guy that's coaching major businesses, guys. I hope you heard this very clear. Everyone, don't work with someone that doesn't have a coach. Just like he's talking about reading that amount of books, I imagine those are some mentors, but he literally outside of that has a key accountability partner. I love it. So, brother, you talk about being in difficult work culture and how to survive that. And we kind of alluded to it a little bit with those leaders that maybe are out of touch or just in the wrong role. How do you survive kind of a crappy work culture? And what's the key here?
It's tough. And I actually wrote a whole article about this on Forbes about the 5.5 signs that you have a bully boss. Okay. Because a bully boss, you think about what a bully is, right? A bully is just somebody that is putting you in a different place, putting you in a box, or belittling your value because of their own self-gratification in some facts. That's the most scientific way you can say it. And unfortunately, there are a lot of promoted leaders in every organization, particularly bigger ones, that have that tendency. And it's because they yell loud. It's because they bark aggressively. People move, but it creates a toxic environment, and it's hard. And so if you're in that environment, the first thing you can do is you don't retaliate. I talk about that in the article. Never try to do something back, but you do try to plan what I say 5 quarters ahead. And if you think 5 quarters ahead is a year and a half, so get a little perspective and say, okay, if I can do this for the next year and a half, what does that do for me and my family? Or should I start now knowing in a year and a half, I'm going to want to move on and do something else? When people think in the immediate in that situation, well, I can't do this. I gotta get out of this week. You're never going to make good decisions. Plan the way out there and say, okay, what do I have to do today to make 5 quarters from now better? Should I talk to some recruiters? Should I go find some different opportunities? Because it'll take you time to find the right opportunity without impacting your family. But you're not a tree. You can move, right? You can do those things. You just got to have perspective how to do it.
Well, and taking the emotions out, that makes a ton of sense, right? Like anything right now that's a visceral emotional response. And you're saying, look, think through this before you just knee-jerk reaction or try, like you said, to fight back. The other one that you talk about is improve your mindset and change your life. Well, I'm all in, brother. I love mindset. It's what I do. So talk to me about improving your mindset, because I'm all in and you're a reader. I'm a voracious reader. I love that. But how do you change your mindset?
So, and mindset is, I talked about bullies a second ago. If you think about it, when we grew up, we went to assemblies in middle school and high school where they'd say, hey, you have a zero tolerance for bullying, right? They'd get up there and say, zero tolerance. If any of you bully, we're going to get after you. And when I was growing up, I remember in high school, there was this kid named Kelly. He was the school bully. I went to a really small high school, like 450 people. And everybody knew Kelly. Everybody was scared of Kelly. Kelly was just this mean old, I hope Kelly is listening to this, okay? But he was just a mean old tough kid. We were all just terrified of him. Got in fights every other day. I mean, it was just tough. But what they didn't tell me was when I graduated, got to college, Kelly disappeared, right? The bullies that you grew up with, they move on. They usually go work, they probably end up doing construction or something the rest of their life. That's what I always think. Kelly's broke or something. It's my own satisfaction. But they go do something and they move on. But what they never teach you about is what we're talking about here, which is actually the bully that's with you your whole life. That's the bully of your brain. And that's the one that's worse than Kelly. That's the one sitting there saying, you're not smart enough. You're not sexy enough. You can't do it. You're not fast enough. Any of those things. And it's beating that bully of the brain on a daily basis that actually separates good to great, that separates average to good. It all starts with, am I letting myself beat me down? And I do it with some simple things. I write down my goals every day. This is not my method. I got it from Grant Cardone, going through his stuff and spending time with their team. I write down my goals every morning and every evening. My big BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goals, but I write them as a positive affirmation. So I say, I have made $5 million in my coaching business. I have the best marriage on planet Earth. I have 3 New York Times bestsellers. I write that and I focus my efforts on those big goals. And then beyond that, I don't allow negative things in my life. If a person's negative, I cut them out. Life's too short. I don't allow, like during this whole election and insurrection day and all those things, people were telling me about it. Hey, did you see about this? No, I didn't really watch it because you know what? That gets me worked up negatively. Life's too short. That stuff's going to take care of itself. And so I eliminate all negative things in my life. If it's not building me up, I don't need it. I don't need it. My mindset's too important. It's the first domino.
Wow, it's powerful, man. And again, I've never met your wife, but I think of the perspective piece. She went through cancer. That's perspective. All you need to say, I am not putting up with this. Yeah. When I literally watched the woman I love go through some real trials and tribulations. So I got to ask this question just because it's one of my favorite questions and you read as much as you do. What are 2, 3 of the most impactful books that you've read that have really shaped, your thinking and have really inspired you to perform at your very best?
Sure. Well, I mean, from a literature perspective, I'm an enormous Charles Dickens fan. I think everybody should read Dickens and Shakespeare. I have a minor in British literature, so I'll talk about that. If I could just get on a podcast about Dickens, I would take up their whole week just talking about it. Okay. But just from a business perspective, every year, every January, I read High Performance Habits by Bouchard. I do that every January as a level set because it's a very core, simple 6 principles. What am I working on? Okay. Every May, I read the 10X rule, Grant Cardone's book, the 10X rule, because from an entrepreneurial perspective and a mindset perspective, it gives you great concepts. And I do it every year as a reset and a reminder. And then the last one, which had the biggest impact on me when I was very young, was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a seminal classic. And he really hits on everything. Begin with the end in mind, seek first to understand, then be understood, and then sharpen the saw at the end, right? That's what that whole concept is. And all of my clients, when I talk to them, I say, all right, we're starting with 10X rule, go. And they're going to read that. And then we're going to do HP6. And then we're going to do 7 habits because it's going to give a framework of everything we're talking about.
So you guys don't have to be looking for brand new books all the time. He just said it. He's literally.
And Let's Go Win. You should obviously but to your point, there's all these other books that come out, right? And I've read a lot of great books that have come out. Go Giver series is another one. And there's all these other ones that are great. But at the same time, they're repackaging the same principles from those. But sometimes you need it in a different way to resonate with you. Sometimes you read Stephen Covey and you go, this guy's a little hokey for me. I can't connect. Or Grant Cardone, he's a little in my face, so I can't do it. So the principles can be found in other places that speak to you personally. you're still accountable to be your best self. And you can't say, well, I don't like Grant Cardone. Well, then find another way, right? Find another way to get yourself jacked up every year. I don't care what it is, but you're accountable to do it.
Well, and we talked about that earlier. Look, there's voices that don't necessarily resonate, but it doesn't mean that the content isn't fantastic. I think the older I get, the more I realize that, to try and set aside whatever judgments. People don't all like me. That's okay. But there's some decent content that you're really looking for.
That's right.
The word freedom, brother, I ask this to every single guest. What does that word really mean to you and in your life?
That's such a powerful question. I've got one of my clients. They developed a whole new level of product. They're in the coaching business. They're 7-figure coaching business, and they created this product line called Freedompreneur, on this mindset of, because they were noticing so many people were entrepreneurs, right? Like, hey, I'm an entrepreneur because I put it on LinkedIn, but I've never sold anything. I've never answered payroll. I've never dealt with that stress. It's very different. Freedom to me is that freedom is, I have the power of choice and I exercise it, right? So, and I protect it, right? So every one of us have the power of choice with everything. We have the agency of choice, and you get to protect it. That's what freedom is. And when you don't have freedom, whether that's financial freedom, like you're broke, whether that's addiction freedom, like you're just getting crushed down, all that does is start to hamper down your ability to choose, and you're in chains. And no one should be in chains. Everybody should be free from that perspective. And you should work to make yourself free. You should have a family to give yourself more time and more freedom of choices. Everything should be about around that concept.
That's powerful right there. I mean, I don't know how I can top any questions on that. I mean, literally choices, guys. You hear it all the time, but I love that you have the freedom to make these choices, and both ways. He's not saying you're going to screw up, but you have that freedom. I love that. What haven't I asked you that I didn't know enough to ask Don Markland to be like, you know what, man, this is something we just got to get out there. So what haven't I asked you that you really want to give to the audience?
What people usually, because and your listeners will be there, where they have an idea, they have something. Well, I want to start a business. And I think everybody needs to know, number one, there has never been a better time on planet Earth to start a business. Just never been. I mean, you can use legal services for super cheap in the cloud to get started. You can get all your bookkeeping things and all done for you. There's never been a better time. But you will not, and you cannot take the elevator to making your business successful. You can't take the escalator. It's just a long freaking staircase. And I know everybody's watching, and I love Brunson. I follow Russell's stuff, and I'm a ClickFunnels guy, and I follow Robin's stuff, and everybody loves this. Hey, I'm motivated, therefore I can create a good business. Motivation is independent of business success. It's persistence, it's tenacity, it's going up every step. And I spend a lot of time with business owners and individuals that work with me that want instant success. I want to drop 60 pounds with this pill. Look, you got to get on the treadmill, and you got to do it a lot, and you got to stop eating all that garbage. And that's how we'll get you there. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Everybody should try and do that. The tax write-offs alone are worth it, but you should, because it'll help you a lot if you have the right perspective of how to do it.
So true. And why would you want something so fast? I love the work personally. Maybe not everybody loves it, but you know what? If you ever have too much idle time, don't you get bored? I get bored. So.
Yeah, and that's where you do stupid things. When you've got, there's that the devil loves idle hands, or whatever the saying is. That is as true in anything. If I've got salespeople, I got salespeople all over the world, and if I have salespeople that have a free hour, trust me, they're not doing a thing. They're not making calls. They're not following up. I've got executives, if they're not booked hour by hour all day, they're doing something stupid. Right? And so I don't want that.
That would be the opposite of crushing mediocrity. I mean, that's just a fact. So how can our listeners connect with you online, Don? I think you have so much good stuff. And I think these 4 C's obviously applicable to any area of life. How could they connect with you?
There's 3 spots you can get me most often. First of all, go to my website, accountabilitynow.net. You can get my free ebook that goes through all the 4 C's. So you can get that. I give that out for free so you can learn. And then you can also follow me like on Instagram, executivecoach.don. I've got a lot of people that follow me there and my content there. And Then a lot of times people are wondering, how can I get coaching? Coaching's too expensive, or I can't afford that. I'm way too early. So I do have an online course when you go to accountabilitynow.net that teaches all of these things every month. It's $7 a month, right? I tried to find how can I get it under Netflix and still make it work. And then you've got something that teaches you the 4 C's, teaches you how to start a business, teaches you sales tactics. We update content every single week, and it's for $7 a month. It's nothing. And I've got people that have their whole team on that, where they just train every morning on those things for that positive mindset. Super easy, and it works great.
And $7 a month, guys, that's next to nothing. So we will absolutely put that in the show notes. Brother, you got an infectious way about you. Maybe it's because your Jazz are doing so well. I see you wearing the hat. So is that
right? I had to represent. We're the number one team. It's been a long time since we've even been part of a national conversation. So I'm on cloud 9 with us being number one. It's great.
Well deserved, man. It's going to be fun to watch. But hey, in all seriousness, I sure appreciate you being here, man. You brought so much knowledge to the table, and I think everyone got a lot out of this. So thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you for all you're doing for people and encourage them to win. That's a big thing. People settle for, just playing. Go win. And I love your concept and how you teach that. So thank you so much.
Truly my pleasure. All right, you guys, I hope you got as much out of this as I did. I've been literally feverishly writing down notes. There's so many powerful thoughts that he had to share. I want you to go ahead and go apply them. Also, go ahead, go to Champions Daily Playbook. It's on Amazon, guys. It's $10. These are some of the things we were talking about. You can implement your goals, just like he was talking about. State your intent for the day. I put that out for a reason. It's who I coach my clients on. You have it at your disposal as well. So until next time, continue transcending life. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to letsgowinpodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.